In the world of business, not all deals are what they seem. Fortunes rise, empires crumble, all with the stroke of a pen. Mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers. Welcome to Mergers She Wrote, where we examine strategies and stories behind the biggest deals in business. Because in M&A, the real risks are the ones you don't take. Welcome back to another episode of Mergers She Wrote. I'm Paloma Goggins, your host and the owner of Nocturnal Legal. Today, I welcome Carol. Am I saying Tice? Is it Tice? Carol Tice to my episode. Thank you so much, Carol, for joining me from the road.
My pleasure.
And so Carol's story today, what I'm going to talk to you about is how she built a community and ultimately sold that community, and her background as a writer and a reporter. And so, Carol, I want to dive right in. Tell me a little bit about your background, how you went from writer to community owner, and then we'll dive in a little bit about how you went through the sale process.
I was a songwriter once upon a time, and I wrote an essay that won a contest and kind of fell into the world of journalism and reporting, and I liked it better because I did not have to worry whether the drummer was going to take psychedelic mushrooms and the overnight party bus to Vegas instead of showing up at the gig. Like, I was in complete control of my product. I found that very exciting. And didn't have to hang around smoky bars at 2 in the morning. So I feel like I was kind of the last person they let in the door without a J school degree. And I wrote for the alternative press, and then I wrote for a business trade pub based in New York covering the West Coast. And then I wanted to get off the road because I had a little child. And I wrote for the Puget Sound Business Journal in Seattle, which is where we're based. This obviously not Seattle. Sad, they're having a 15-inch of rain atmospheric river right now, and we are happy to be in the RV out in Quartzsite, Arizona.
Oh, I am sure.
So I because I had a background as a legal secretary, I was kind of the person that people threw a lot of SEC document related stories, IPOs, mergers and acquisitions. So pretty much from the minute I got there, I was diving into public documents about transactions going on, SPAC deals, all kinds of, private equity funding, and learning about that world. And I loved the people I was working with, loved my editors, and I thought I would work there forever. And I had no plans to go into business myself until those editors left and a new team came in, and the party was totally over. And I was the most highly paid reporter on staff. And then in 2005, I believe, I was let go. And I thought I would just freelance right until I found another job. I had freelanced before of my jobs, but I replaced my income pretty quickly. And then during the 08, 09 downturn, I ramped it to 6 figures. And I gradually became aware that that was not the experience a lot of other writers were having. During this time period, they thought the macroeconomic condition made it impossible for them to make a good living, and they were making $5 an article on content mills. And I saw that, like most freelance writers, did not have the kind of business discipline that I sort of instinctively brought to my freelancing business because I'd been hanging around business people, and that I could kind of offer that. And I started a blog. I was super excited. There was a new way of communicating where I didn't have an editor and I had the publish button. And I just started writing about how I was doing what I was doing, how to make a good living, how to find better clients, get a raise. And I thought maybe I'd write a book, and it would sell 1 million copies and I'd be rich. I had very vague, business ideas of how to monetize the blog. I knew that I didn't want to slap ads all over it. All of my mentors were like, don't do that. And that really erodes your authority. And there are better ways to earn. I had done paid webinars, I'd done this and that. And then I joined a paid community. I think it was $20 a month for bloggers to learn how to make my blog better, and be more successful. And as soon as I got in it, I went, this is amazing. I love it. I'm learning so much. The look at this course stuff and being able to talk to other people who are doing this is amazing. And there's nothing like this for freelance writers, and there really kind of should be. And I knew that because I was getting emails all the time, oh my God, Carol, I have a meeting tomorrow and I don't know what to say and I don't know what to bid and what should I do? And I, was not interested in signing up to be the 24/7 free Dear Abby of freelance writing. But there was clearly a need for information, and I felt like the community platform was the way to deliver it because writers are broke. Selling them a $10,000 coaching package was not going to be very easy. And I loved the concept of using the power of low ticket to drive mass adoption, to be able to help many, many people, not like I get, 8 coaching clients this year. I really wanted to change the whole industry. I was kind of on a mission to like shut down writer scams and fight for fair pay, make more writers understand their value, So I had kind of a like crusader mission, and I wanted to be paid for my time. And I just started talking to my blog audience about, I'm thinking about building this, could you take this survey about what you would like in a community? And that's how I built Freelance Writers Den and opened it. And I had maybe 750 blog subscribers when I launched it. And it ramped to 500 members pretty quickly. And then hit a wall, ended up getting over that, going to 1,000. At that point, I think I started to get approached by business brokers and buyers, and started to become aware that what I had was kind of a saleable asset.
Well, and so your background is in M&A reporting, which you talked about, like using, seeing the SEC documents and all that. And so did that play a factor in how you built your community or how you thought about potentially selling your community at some point?
I think I had a dim sense that, it was a saleable asset. For a long time, I wasn't thinking about selling it. I was just still building and building it up, and it was providing a great lifestyle. It was a lot of work to do. I think a lot of people who found paid communities like 18 months later, they're out. They've sold it off, and I did it for over a decade. So I was kind of hooked on how gratifying it is to change so many lives and impact so many people, and just I don't know. I think there's a certain type of person who really has a big heart for helping other people succeed. And if you are that kind of person, community is such a beautiful business model to work in. And, in the past year, we actually went to Europe for a month, and I got to talk with and meet with several of my Den members. And, one of them lives in Paris now with her daughter. Her husband actually died very shortly after her daughter was born, very young. And she was able to build a fantastic career for herself and live in a great city. And, literally was said, you changed my life. It's hard to walk away from it. It's so fulfilling. And I was earning an income I never could have imagined as a freelance writer. But eventually I came to feel a little tired, to feel a sense of an ending. My kids were getting to the end of high school. I kind of felt like I had taught everything I knew, was somewhere in the materials. And I had this vision, maybe I'd retire and we'd sell the 5-bedroom house on Lake Washington in Seattle that we had for the kid years, and downsize, and I'd kind of be done. But I flunked retirement, partly because kids continued to bounce back. We have 2 with some special needs, and they're sort of slower launchers than maybe others. And we had bought the RV and done a tryout trip. We liked it. We kind of didn't know where we wanted to retire to. And at the same time that's going on, I am hearing from brokers and I'm hearing from kind of prospective buyers, and I started to get at least mildly curious and to say, yeah, why don't you send me over your run sheet of what all you ask, and so I can start learning about what it is you want to know about me. And I learned that I needed to professionalize the business in some important ways, like monthly P&Ls, which I wasn't doing. I was doing my taxes once a year and going, this is awesome. Have a great lifestyle. I'm making, double six figures in good years, and I'm very happy, and there's clearly profit in it for me. I had a team of 10. I was paying them.
Just to go back to the brokers approaching you and you realizing that you had a saleable business, did you have multiple people that came to the forefront that were looking, like, did you have bidding wars, or was it more like you had a couple of people show up and you're like, oh, actually, I can make a go of this, and that's when the wheels started turning, that you could maybe get your house in order and then make it a true sale?
Well, a couple years before I sold, I hired accountants, started doing monthly P&Ls, started thinking through taking myself out of all the branding. There was like a little cartoon Carol me that was part of my blog branding. And to me, the community and the blog were kind of a package. And so, I had started making some moves that I knew would position it better. I also did $10,000 of business consulting about how to go from 1,000 members to 1,500, because I had talked to brokers enough to understand my sale multiple, and I could see I would need to get to 1,500 for it to be a sale number that I would feel like it makes sense to sell. That would be enough of a payday, and I'd feel like this is good.
Why was 1500 like a marker, just out of curiosity?
It's about a 3.5x, 3x kind of multiple, and so 1,500 members at 25 a month, plus some course upsells and things, that was going to be the number that to me was like, okay, I could go have a great life with this exit. Yeah. I had put away quite a lot of money in the course of running the business, but you know, I I was looking for a real exit. What tipped it over into, okay, let's actually try and do this, is that I met a broker who I thought had a deep understanding of the online business space. They only did digital business, had some exits I kind of knew about, as I recall, and I just thought they could sell it, and they had a large network of, people who buy and sell business. They seemed to have the connections and be positioned to actually seriously sell it, not just some random online marketplace. Like, as there's many of these, and all the businesses seem to be like, say, for sale for about 50 grand or something. Like, it's all really tiny money. And so I felt like I trusted them enough to hand them, I think it was 12 grand up front, whatever that was a big thing to me, to just take that flyer and you're not getting that money back. And um yeah, and then we started kind of engaging in the process. I wish I could say I ended up in a busy bidding war, and I maybe could have, if I'd wanted to have more patience with the process. But this was the depths of COVID winter, the first one. So we started the process, maybe it was already COVID, maybe spring, just when it was just starting to happen, and we're still thinking, we'll all stay home for 6 weeks and then it'll be over, just really early. And
So did COVID negatively impact or positively impact your deal?
I don't know. I have nothing to compare it with. But that's an interesting question. I did end up selling to people I never was able to be in a room with because of COVID. And I don't know that that would have changed much of anything, but we had nibbles from a few people. And then we had one very live lead where they were very excited about the company. And we had a nibble from Writer's Digest, I think. And but they were like, this is like November, and they were like, we're really busy and we want to look at it in January maybe. And I was like, well, I don't want to sit around for like 3 more months waiting for to see if you maybe want to get involved in this, because I have, a fish on the hook here. And so we kind of rolled along, and it was super stressful. You remember we were all like totally isolating. And, every day I'm being asked a new question I don't know the answer to in due diligence. I'm doing the two full-time jobs where you're running the company and making sure sales don't go down and the numbers continue to look great. And you have the full-time job of selling the business. And we had a guest unit in the basement of our house, and I actually like ran away from home. And there was a lot of sort of family teenage drama stuff going on. And I was like, I cannot deal with any of your stuff now. I am going to go down there and buy myself some frozen food, put it in the freezer and of the fridge downstairs, and I will see you when this is over. And like really, I barely said hello to them for a couple of months. Just, I don't know if that was like harsh but that was what I needed to do because my head was blowing off, you know. I mean, I had a team, I had a lawyer, I had the people around me, but these were we weren't, some of these metrics we were tracking, but a lot of them we weren't. What's the lifetime value of one of your members? I don't know. I just, it makes money. Like I just, I was a word person, a writing person, not a numbers person. And I didn't come out of sales, which many people in online business have a marketing background. I came out of journalism. So I wasn't one of these people of like, oh, if 1,000 people go in the funnel, the conversion rate is X this. And, they've got all these metrics at their fingertips. I did not have these things. So they all had to be hurriedly created during due diligence. And we had to create an operations manual. We had some things documented, but it really needed to be pulled together. It was a lot.
Well, I was going to say, I've worked with plenty of clients that have had that same experience where they haven't done any of the legwork up front. And so when they're going to actually sell the business, they're realizing they have to do that double duty where they're operating their business, running it, in the thick of just daily operations, but also preparing all the diligence and everything else. And you get to a point where you're like, I can't, something is faltering, right? And a lot of times people realize that they've kind of neglected, I would say, their business in the process because their full attention is required more so on the actual diligence or like making the deal happen. So I understand completely where you're coming from on that piece.
Yeah, fortunately, I had a staff of 10, so I had that going for me. And I brought one admin kind of into my confidence about it eventually because, like, I was asking for so many weird numbers. Eventually, I just felt like I'm exploring. I finally said, I'm exploring selling this, which was what I was doing in my mind. Not like, hey, I'm selling this off, you're all out of a job, but, and actually that one admin still works for them 5 years later. She ended up being retained. So, but she was off digging up numbers and stuff. And then we hit like a crisis point because they dug into my accountant's P&Ls. And what we learned is that my accountants were kind of incompetent and their numbers were crap and it all had to be redone and the business got devalued. And that was the like dun dun dun, just drama cliffhanger, moment where I had to decide if I still wanted to do it.
So when you say that the devaluation occurred, like, and obviously having good P&Ls, right, is critical to this whole process. But was the devaluation something that you got to a place where you're like, okay, this is not financially what I thought it was going to be because of the devaluation? And then I guess what did you go through mentally in this process of like, okay, I'm going to still proceed, or like at what point does this still make sense?
Yeah, so I liken this a lot to when we were adopting the first of our two adopted kids. Like we met a birth mom, she liked us, and she was about maybe 7 months pregnant, and then we went through the 60 days of Under Washington law, they can change their mind at any point after the baby's born for until it's finalized, and you're just kind of riding this roller coaster hoping you're going to get a baby. And towards the end, before our son Leon was born, we looked at each other and said, if this doesn't work out, we're not doing this again, because no one can go through this amount of stress. Like, it's just so, and people who tend to be relinquishing a baby have chaotic lives, and there's a lot happening, and we were just like, yeah, this is a one shot. And I kind of started to feel the same way. And maybe COVID was a factor in that. Maybe I would have pulled it back and just said, yeah, let's keep looking for buyers. And maybe Writer's Digest would have paid more. Maybe I would have cleaned up my numbers better. Maybe I would have ended up with more money. Um, but I was so far down the stress rabbit hole of it that I kind of made my peace with a 200 grand less number. And I just felt like I can't start over doing this with another buyer. Like, I maybe I'm just not even selling it, if I don't do this. And I feel like I want to sell it. And maybe the stress of being in that first winter of COVID where there was just no shots yet and so much uncertainty. And as someone who almost died of a severe asthma attack in my past, in my 30s, I felt like this thing was coming for me. Like, it had my number on it. I felt very afraid of getting COVID, and thankfully did not until after I think I was vaccinated. But, there was a lot of stress and fears just sort of in the air. And I felt like I wanted to be able to not, to take a break, to be done, kind of working this hard, and to have that payday. There was money on the table. I don't know. You don't know when you have a buyer if you will ever have another buyer. We all know how many businesses do not ever successfully exit. It's most of them, And I had watched a friend of mine who had a bigger blog than I did for freelance writing just shut the doors.
Looking back, what do you wish you knew about first time exits that no one told you about? Obviously, in light of like the P&L stuff and the revaluation, obviously that plays a role in it too. But is there anything else from a first time exit that you wish you knew?
Just be documenting, know every possible metric, have an operations manual. You think it's all cash and you think you've kind of got it written down. Really be formal about your processes and who does what, job descriptions for all your people. You'll just save yourself so much stress and anxiety in the process if you're more ready to go, and yeah, look at all the stats that buyers like to have and think about getting those tracking, because they'd like to see 18 months of them, not just the 3 months you're doing this deal. Yeah, I mean, understand your business better. The thing I did get a hang of is focusing the business. This is the process of going from 1,000 to 1,500 members. Over the years, I had gotten kind of diverse. I had a co LLC with someone else over here, and I had a coaching program. And that first round with my business consultant was like, if you're thinking about selling, these don't matter. These aren't part of the sale. So get rid of them and just all roads lead to your community. And that's how we drove it up. So you have to look at it as like, what of this survives your departure? And that is the only part the buyer cares about. Make that part as great looking, drive that part of the business up as much as you can. That's what's selling.
Well, and I was going to say, you mentioned having KPIs and like them being really fascinated with like what was the lifetime value of this member and some of these other nuances. Like, I think many business owners don't think about that in their daily operations, right? Is like, okay, I have maybe a basic P&L or basic balance sheet, but I also don't have this kind of big picture financial perspective. I mean, besides the lifetime value of a community member, were they looking at any other KPIs that surprised you, or was there anything else they asked you that you were like, oh wow, I hadn't thought about that before?
Oh, every day it was a new one. Every day of like 90 days of due diligence. How many emails do you send in a campaign? How long is a campaign? How we were not always open. Community, how often are you open? How long can I see a year's worth of campaigns? Go dig up those emails. The buyer's job is to poke around your business and ask as many questions, just keep asking questions until you say no, to learn as much about the business as they can. So that's what they're doing. And your job is to decide when you're done answering, as the seller, and you're like, enough, enough. I feel I've told you what I'm going to tell you, and we hit that point where we were like,
Enough is enough.
yeah, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to buy it or not?
Well, I think it's fascinating they wanted you to dug up like old emails and like pull things up that like arguably as a business owner you aren't necessarily archiving your old emails. I mean, perhaps as like a good
Well, I
practice.
was. I mean, they're in a CRM. They definitely were still around because we would crib from them for new campaigns, and that stuff still existed. But the thing you start to think about is whether these buyers are really in league with some competitor of yours and they're not really buyers and they're just looking to steal ideas from you. So you hit a point where you're like, yeah, that's kind of all I'm sharing with you.
Oh, 100%. We see that a lot in the insurance world is insurance agencies will have competitors poking around and a lot of times the advice is, look, we're not going to hand over our client list until closing and we'll give you a redacted version so that you feel like you can see some of the KPIs, the metrics, the financials, but we're not handing this over without either a significant portion of the purchase price that becomes non-refundable. And at what point we kind of had this moment where we were like, okay, at what value is it to them, right? You put a dollar amount as like a barrier to entry for them getting access, even with an NDA, to your client book. And maybe they're a big competitor. And so, $100,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket if they think that they can go and remarket to your group. So I could not agree more. There's definitely a balance in that whole dance in the deal. And so I I know you had mentioned growing kind of rapidly and then hitting a wall. And I'm not very familiar with building a community, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this episode that aren't either. When it comes to my understanding, my basic understanding of like running campaigns and having community built is that you do have to have a list that you're actively cultivating. And for someone who is thinking about potentially growing a list, I feel like if you Google it, there's like a million ways to build a list and to grow a community and all these other things. So I think from your experience, like, is building a list like this magical unicorn, or is there like a formula? Like how does one even get into this space? Because even I think about it, right? I've got a newsletter. I'm never planning to build a community, but my newsletter grows as my client base grows and my connections grow, but I'm not actively out there building a list from advertising or anything else. So if someone was listening and thinking about like, okay, how do I build my list as like a platform? How do you even go about doing that?
Well, there are many ways, and I'm sort of marketing method agnostic. I'm not here to say the one true way is this. It with that community, I built it for over 3 years of blogging. At the start, 5 days a week blogging, thousands of posts. We did it with content and selling expertise, and built a list. Eventually, it was like 20,000, 25,000 names. And you don't need a gigantic list. I have a million people on my list. If you have a highly engaged list, which I did, and who felt like Carol knows what she's talking about. I want in her community. It's only $25. It's a no-brainer. I don't come out of marketing and don't enjoy marketing, so this was the model that I liked. On my new community, where I am teaching people the answers to all your questions, Community Growth Academy on School, we have a whole sort of portmanteau of strategies that different members are using, and that we're talking about. Permission-based marketing in LinkedIn DMs is popular these days. I just opened a free level of my community, and just convening a free level community you can upsell is actually something that's succeeding big time for some very big earners on, 4 million a year type earners on school. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but generally all roads lead to you're building a list you could send a marketing email cycle to, and ours would be like, heads up, the den's going to be open. It's going to happen on Tuesday. Watch your email. It's open. You can join now. Here's the success story. Here's all our FAQs. If you have questions, overcoming objections, we would just kind of run through our deal. We're doing a live event. Come ask questions live. Um, and then we'd close the doors again. So we had a model of a lot of scarcity and exclusivity in that. And people would stay in because they didn't know if they could get back in, and people would join because they didn't know when they could get in, get another chance. And we'd be open like 4, 6 times a year for maybe a week. And so the rest of the time we were busy serving members. It helped us administratively to not constantly be onboarding.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was going to say, so obviously, you know what the buyers wanted when they looked at your business from a metrics perspective, but like from your perspective, having truly operated one for a decade, what do you think is the most valuable components to a community that's sellable?
They're looking for persistence for those members who stay. There's not a ton of churn. Our churn rate was pretty low, so that was attractive. There's a lot of communities that there's sort of not a lot of there, and they're good marketers, and people are just churning through. It's like 100% churn in a year. That was not us. And yeah, we definitely did not show them our member list, our email list that we market to. We'd show them like the number count at the bottom of the form. Um, what else did they want to know? Just I think one of the big things that we did that made it very saleable was that this community, in terms of expertise, was not all me. That's super important. You're having guests on, and you have guest presenters teaching courses, and I paid them super well. And but they could see that there are a range of experts in this niche that they could maybe tap to do another course or to come be the substitute for me in the community. That was important, and just kind of being able to take yourself out of the business really at every level. I had moderators. I was not in there answering every forum question, answering every homework assignment in a class. I could step away, go on a vacation. My team pretty much knew how to do all the things. Somebody on my team knew how to do, you know, pretty much
I'm hearing
everything.
like delegation is key. I'm hearing diversification is key. I'm just trying to spell it out for listeners who are like, okay, what does that mean in my business, right? Is especially if you're listening and you're like, this is really neat, but I don't have a community. Like, what might this look like in my business? But I think that's super helpful. And I mean, I think generally speaking, one of the biggest constraints for anybody who's selling is not knowing what that potential buyer is going to find value in, and you highlighting the potential, like, okay, holy smokes, hadn't really been tracking that, right? And so it should hopefully give listeners an idea of like, okay, maybe I'm not selling today, maybe I'm selling in 5, 10 years from now, but what can I start doing now to help tee this up at a later time so that I'm not digging in my archives, I'm not building SOPs on the fly, all these things that are just super common in the merger and acquisition space for everyone. But so you got this deal done in COVID. I think you lessons learned along the way are super critical, and I think super helpful for anyone who's listening and thinking about going this road for themselves as well. Um, I feel like generally speaking, and this is maybe a difficult question for you to answer, but the world of the internet, right? There's so much information, there's so many gimmicks. I feel like it can be so difficult to determine what's a good platform, what's a good community, what's a good resource. And so, having built something in a space that arguably I would say most people, like you had said, don't find that success. How can someone go out there and not only I think potentially find success on the internet, but also determine like what is really worth their time and energy. Like, because you said it just perfectly, which is there's some of these communities that have 100% turnover rate because the value that they're providing is nothing, right? It's fluff. And there's so much of that.
Or there's one introductory course and like kind of there's that's kind of all there is, and the founder is like, God, they're in the wind. They are not showing up at all. They're not on a live call even once a month. There's no sign of them. You know, what I want to say is I want to circle back on one thing and then I want to answer that. That like the first question buyers are going to ask you is how many hours a week do you have to spend in the business? Because that's like a red flag for them. If you're like, well, I'm working 80 hours a week doing this thing and I can't wait to get out of it, they're like, well, I don't want to work 80 hours in your business. You know, they're hoping you're going to say a very low number, or that, I do it because I love it, but like my team, I also leave, and, like one of my community members now, he goes on like month long trips routinely. He's like 80, but when he's in, and he doesn't do anything when he's on the trips. He is out, he has everything delegated. That's the kind of story they want to hear, is that your team has your back, it's all delegatable. You do it if you feel like it, if you're in town, if it's fun. He's like, I love to talk to people about investing because that's his niche, so he'll get on there if he's in town. Otherwise, he's out. He comes on like and does a live once a month. Um, but I'm sorry, cycle back to the question we were at. Oh, how do you know what's a good community to join to like learn? Or if you
Yeah, I think generally speaking, like knowing like the secret sauce on the back end, and knowing that there are people who are just good at marketing, right? And they're not necessarily selling education or something that's providing value. Like, how do you, as just a person who potentially is running a business and you want to find those people that can actually help you, like what would be a good way to figure out a good community or a good group coaching or like whatever it is, the platform, like how can you tell the good from the bad?
find their resume, what have they actually done in this space? In my space in freelance writing, there were so many charlatans. It made my head explode. People who are like, I had one good month on Upwork and now I will teach you to be a freelance writer. I'm not making that up. That's an actual example. And it went so badly that I believe now she trains VAs or something. She had to get out of the space. She didn't really know anything. So that's incredibly common. That, or what they call the learn along with me model. I am doing this and you also could be doing this and I'll tell you what I'm doing. But I'm not ahead of you in this game. I used to go look at their writing resumes, who they're written for. There would be like no brand names. I had written for Entrepreneur and Forbes and, won national journalism awards, and really look at their cred. How long have they been doing that thing? I am like a dinosaur of community now in my new community. I've been at this 14 years. I'm old. My experience is older than the platforms that now host these. We hand built it all on a WordPress platform and had to make all these plugins talk to each other. It was like thousands and thousands of dollars of back end costs every month. And now I pay $97 to school. But yeah, I mean, really, go look them up. Look at their LinkedIn profile. Look at what have they done. Look back in their resume. What's their cred really? Yeah, except good marketing. There's a lot of people who do have that. Yeah. And how much are they in the community? How much are they going to help you? What all do you get? What are the benefits? You know, what are you going to get out of it? And I built a course called Built to Sell, with all of the stuff we've been talking about. So hopefully my students will do better than I did in prepping for sale.
Well, I was going to say that the hard part is people, in business, you're so busy and people have shiny new object syndrome. They want the easy button, and there's so many people online willing and ready to take advantage of that positioning, right? Is that you just want someone to solve all your problems, and especially in our world, right, in the legal world, it's a done for you type of service, right? You're not coming to someone to say, okay, I want help drafting this document. No, they want you to draft the document. And so But there's plenty of other options in businesses where they're looking for guidance because they don't want to outsource something or they want to learn it themselves. And I've been in that position my own business and thinking, okay, you're right. What am I getting from this? What am I getting from this community? What am I getting from this group? Because there's a million places you can spend your money and join, and it's endless.
I think smart people who sign up for communities, follow along with that person for a while. That's why blogging was so great. And now it's just me posting on my LinkedIn and people kind of following along with my van life and with how I'm building this community kind of in public, talking about what's working and not, and um, why I'm making X business decision in the business and not, and what the members are doing. And I think usually you don't spend a lot of money for a solution from somebody you kind of just met on the internet, hopefully. But if you've got several of them, really compare the offers and, like, yeah, how there for you are they going to be, and how active is that community? Because yeah, there's a lot of communities that you go in and the forums are kind of a ghost town. I used to hear from them. They'd be like, Carol, can you tell me why this is happening? Because they knew our community was pretty dang engaged. And that is the magic of what makes it saleable, is that the community is the community. You're really selling the passion for this topic and the involvement of all the people who are the paying members in the community. That obviously, can go with, that's not you. That is the magic of peer sharing. And that is an asset, and yeah, there's work to do to foster engagement and get people talking, but and you want to do it because that is a key factor. Buyers are going to look at the activity level and how many of you people buy that course upsell, how many of those free level members convert to paid members. These are metrics they're going to want.
So I'll ask a final question because we mentioned you RVing, and obviously we could see that you are currently in your RV, and I love it. So how has the freedom post exit changed the way that you approach entrepreneurship and the advice you give other creators? Because obviously, building another community while you're also on the road lends itself probably to an entirely different lens than where you were originally.
It's a whole different game for me now. Having had an exit, I'm actually not thinking in terms of scaling this one massively. I'm thinking about exclusive 100 person, because that would be like a 10K a month income. Like, that would be an income. I have other sources of income now. I sold a big house and didn't buy another one. So I feel like that's sort of my comfort zone, and I've learned that I want to actually work closely with these members. Launching a successful community is reasonably complex, and there's a lot to it, and I'm trying to get people to do steps in order so that they are engineered for success. And I may just go to 100 and then keep raising the price and keep it very exclusive and small. So yeah, very different. And I just opened this free level a week ago as an experiment, and I'm completely sold on it. Things have changed so much, and you may know we are in a trust crisis. That, yeah, and there's AI things selling things, and that I did $6,000 of Facebook ads to launch this community, and it converted zero. Built a big list off it. Was a very successful campaign in terms of list building. No conversion. And it's because those people didn't know me for very long. They just came in on an ad. And with a free level, you can just let people start experiencing the value you deliver, and then you build the trust that way. And to me, that's a lot easier than paying for Facebook ads. I'm thrilled to have these people membership doubled like immediately. And I already had several upgrades to paid. And so, that's, I'd say, one of the biggest humps right now is, yeah, if you don't already have a tribe, but maybe if you're a longtime coach, you got a big list already, you're set. You're a 60 to 90-day launch in my world. I'm like, come do these steps and we're open. But if you're building audience, that can be a way to do it without spending a lot on ads and things.
Very cool. Well, and I would imagine you've learned a lot from your past transaction with delegation and with you being on the road and maybe perhaps having moments where you're not capable of always being online, like the delegation piece comes in.
You know it. I already have a moderator and a someone doing the newsletter both on trade outs, which is the other great thing about the community model is you now have something that's valuable to members and you can trade them out for labor if you want to and make their membership free, get a little help, and it's very high value to them that they get free access, and it really costs you almost nothing to do. So it's one of the things I love about community, and you get people from the community who really get the audience and get the people and understand what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's excellent. Excellent advice. I think most people don't think about trade outs or even swapping, right? I think that's in a world where everyone is just wanting to get paid. A lot of times I think they lose sight of the fact that there's potentially you're losing out on really solid talent that perhaps like you can do that bartering system. So well, I really appreciate your time today, Carol, and it has been so fascinating learning about how you built this community and sold it. It's really awesome. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. Yeah, build it to sell it. I really got sucked back into doing the new community because you just meet a million coaches and their name of their business is theirname.com. And I just die a little inside every time I see it because I know there's no exit. This is a work till you drop, can't take a vacation. That's a no pay week. It's not good. You're not building an asset that you can earn that will earn for you while you're not around. And that's and like leaving that legacy. I still get people connecting to me on LinkedIn who are like, "Oh, I just got in the den." And I'm like, "I sold it 5 years ago." But I'm so glad it's still helping you. And I don't have to do anything. But like all of the information I imparted, it is still helping people. And it's like it means a lot to me to leave that legacy.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Carol's story. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it, comment or like, and tune in next week for another episode of Merger She Wrote.
In the world of business, not all deals are what they seem. Fortunes rise, empires crumble, all with the stroke of a pen. Mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers. Welcome to Mergers She Wrote, where we examine strategies and stories behind the biggest deals in business. Because in M&A, the real risks are the ones you don't take.